I've seen some messaging floating around recently along the lines of trauma is fake or your trauma is a lie. And honestly, these really piss me off because I have lived it and it was very much real for me. So I'm here to tell you your trauma is not fake and it is real. It is not a lie, and here's why. I'm Nicola, and for the last 25 years, I've been exploring ways to release my patterns of pain, to break the cycle so I don't pass my stuff on to my kids. And I'd love to help you do the same. So the first argument comes from a book, and honestly, I'm loath to even mention it or link to it because I don't want to give it any more publicity than it's already got. But it's called The Courage to Be Disliked. And this book argues that trauma doesn't exist because it redefines trauma to be the experience that happened to you instead of the impact it had on you. And that we get to decide what these experiences mean, and therefore, because we decide what that means, trauma doesn't exist. That's what those decisions that we make around what those events mean determine our lives. Therefore, we are deciding what to take from that. And when the hero of the story questions the example given, instead of actually addressing the concerns and filling in the gaps and addressing the flaws, it just moves on to another example. So it's not really actually explaining things properly. And this idea of denying trauma actually comes from a psychologist called Adler, who was around in the early 1900s, and he denied the existence of trauma. But at the time, we didn't have the information we have now about how the brain works, about how the body is affected by trauma and stress. And so it's not founded on all the information that we have these days. And this book goes on to claim that basically we're using trauma as an excuse. We're saying, I can't do this because I have trauma. And that is not how we use trauma. We recognize trauma as something that is affecting us and causing us to behave a certain way. And then when we heal that, we can change the way we behave. But this book completely skips over the fact that trauma is actually the impact these experiences have on us at the time that we're having these experiences, often at the time when we are too young to know any better, or when we're in a suboptimal state. We're making these decisions in a less than ideal situation about what life means and what the rules of life are, and we go on to live our lives based on these rules as if those decisions we made at the time of the trauma were true, without even realizing that's what we're doing. Trauma is what we subconsciously believe about ourselves and about how the world works because of those experiences. And this is why two people can have exactly the same experience and one is traumatized and one is not, because everyone is not the same. We all have different capabilities and backgrounds and beliefs and personalities, and we take different things from every experience. Yes, we are all trying to meet needs. We're trying to achieve goals with the actions that we take, but they're not always conscious and they're not always current decisions about what things mean. A lot of it's happening on autopilot. I've worked with many talented healers who have allowed me to re-experience things I was not conscious of, and they were affecting my health and well-being. And they were incredibly painful to bring up and release. And doing that left me a completely different person as a result, but I was not choosing to see things that way. I had no idea these things were even in me or affecting me. If I was a more cynical person, I might suggest that these philosophies around denying trauma's existence are intended to muddy the water around the definition of trauma so that we don't own our own experience. We are less confident that what we are looking at is actually trauma. And so therefore we're less likely to say, okay, now I know what's happening to me and I can do something about it. And thereby weakening our ability to heal ourselves and take back control of our lives. Or maybe it's just that any publicity is good, even if it's bad. The second idea I've seen going around is that trauma is a narrative made up so that we take responsibility for our own failings and our own flaws instead of railing against the broken system that created these for us. That trauma is in fact a parasite of kinds that's been installed in us, a program making us believe that we're irreparably broken. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't just say, oh, look, it's an installed program and then be completely fine. But I really wish I could. I really do. I'm not going to argue for a moment that our system isn't broken. It absolutely is, and it continues to fail millions of people every single day. But I also don't believe that having trauma makes us irreparably broken, permanently unfixable. We just have stuff that's in us that's getting in the way, and I have a whole video about this that you might want to watch after this one. And yes, we may have a true self that can never be really altered by our experiences, but it's buried under layers and layers of our human experience and the beliefs we take from those experiences, and it's up to us to change that. If we want to change our experience in our current life and make our lives better, then it has to start with us. After all, who made the broken systems that are supposedly installing these programs in us? Who's running these broken systems? Is it people who are safe, whole and helpful? No, I don't think so. These are people who are hurt, they are damaged, they have trauma, but they are not taking responsibility for their own experience, and they are pushing their pain out onto the world and affecting everyone around them. The third perspective that's been going around for decades is this idea of false memories, that memories of trauma or negative experiences are either invented or implanted by the people we're working with. Now, this particular theory has never been properly studied or proven, and it's actually been found through over the research over the last decades is that core traumas are actually quite hard to modify, let alone implant. I've remembered many unpleasant things over the course of my healing journey, and I have asked myself many times, did this really happen? Are these memories real? And at the end of the day, I will never know for certain. I will never have definitive proof that this actually happened to me. But eventually I realized the answer to that question didn't matter. What mattered was that those things were real to me, and that accessing those things allowed me to understand who I was, why I was behaving the way I was behaving, and take active steps to begin to heal. And that, at the end of the day, is what matters, is the results you get, not what happened in the past, not who was right or wrong, not what did or didn't happen, but what is real and true for me right here, right now, and what it means I can do and choose differently in the future as a result of that learning and that understanding and that healing. So my main issue with all of these arguments and these ideologies is that in a world where people are just starting to wake up to the idea of trauma, that they have things in them that are affecting how they behave, that are causing them to behave in dysfunctional ways, so that they can actually start to own that, take responsibility, find ways to heal. That what we are doing is we are feeding them these fabulously impressive, cogent seeming arguments that lead them to doubt their perspective, to lead them to doubt the idea that trauma is even real. It's a form of gaslighting where we're actually introducing uncertainty and lack of clarity and undermining the confidence in people's ability to say, I know what's going on with me and I can do something about it. The problems that arise from this kind of language and these messages are that this invalidation can actually re-traumatize and make the problems worse. It can increase shame and self-blame because, well, if this is the case, then surely I should just be able to think differently or choose differently and be fixed. So why can't I do that? There must be something wrong with me. And it prevents people from seeking out effective treatment. If the message running through your head is, well, my trauma is not real, so there's nothing I can do about it, why would I go looking for solutions? Because there's nothing wrong, therefore there's nothing to do. And yet we still have our dysfunctional behaviors. We still have these patterns that we're passing on to our kids. So there is something there that is not working optimally for us. Trauma is real. The science shows that there are clear neurobiological changes that happen as a result of trauma. We can see behavioral effects, psychological effects, social effects, emotional effects. We have measured changes in genetic expression as a result of trauma. I've got a whole video on epigenetics and how experiencing stress and trauma changes the way that our genes are expressed, including our stress response. And we have research that shows that negative experiences, stressful experiences, trauma in childhood can lead to massive changes in health and well-being across many facets of life, well into adulthood, possibly for the rest of our lives. So we have research that shows trauma, the effects of trauma, the changes that it has on us. These are real, they're measurable. We can measure the biological effects. We can measure the psychological effects. We can measure the social effects. And we have evidence, clear evidence, that trauma can be altered. It can be healed. We have many effective treatments I've talked about many of them before on this channel previously. It's not a case of getting on an endless hamster wheel of never healing and trying things that don't work and not changing anything and not getting better. Some techniques may work for you and some may not. I have tried many techniques over the years and some fit my needs and my personality, and others just weren't right for me. And I've developed my own list, and I've got that as a download for you if you want to check out the techniques that I've found work for me over the years. But it is a case of trying things and finding the things that work for you. But there are effective techniques and you can heal. The solutions to trauma are not as simple as these ideas would lead you to believe. It's not a case of just saying, oh, I'm just making this up to suit my purposes, or oh, this is just something that's been installed in me and I can just now completely remove it just by becoming aware of that. It's not as simple as that. It's actually very disempowering to think of it that way. But there are things you can do. You can identify what's going on with you. You can find ways to release this stuff and to heal, and you can change the future. So if you're ready to dive into my 5D process for figuring out what to do once you've identified these issues and how you can actually resolve this stuff that's going on for you, watch this video next. And I'll see you in the next one.